Okay, let's continue where we left off. So I'm going to start from the sections piece here. I just made it look a little bit nicer by adding a shadow, some padding around it here. So I made it rounded MD shadow and P4. The next thing we need to do is actually create that HTML. So we have two things to do. We need to create the button. So you'll see here, we need to have that generate page button, and we also need to create the HTML container itself. So let me start off by doing that HTML container. So I have here generated HTML page, which takes in HTML. And you'll see that HTML is just a state variable here called with the set HTML here. So let's start off by creating that generate HTML page. And this is pretty simple. Like, the page itself doesn't have much. It just has a div with an ID landing page result, and it just shows dangerously set inner HTML to the HTML prop. Now, one important thing to note is that I'm going to ask it to create HTML in Tailwind. And Tailwind is pre-compiled, right? So what I need to do is just use the play HTML directly here, or the script directly here, even though Tailwind Play shouldn't be used in production, but it's really great for previewing how your HTML looks like straight away. So I added the import here, and we now have that generated HTML page. It's empty right now because we've done a check that if it is empty to not show it, props.html, and otherwise it's going to show that div with the ID landing page result. So let me add the button as well. So once the generated section is created here, I just need to go and add a button, generate page. Again, I see that button here. I maybe just want to give it some styles. Okay, I'm not going to do too much. I'll just do something very basic here, just to show the concept. And we can later make it look nicer if we really want to, or you guys can do that as your own project. Okay, now that I've created my button, what I need to do is actually have that button do something, right? So what I need to do is create the action for that button. So what happens on click? So what I really need to do is on click for that button, I need to go through that generating the landing page. So I'm going to create a new function called handle landing page generation. So on click handle generated landing, and I'm going to add that function here. So let's add it. So one thing I'm doing is that handle generated landing is going to pass through each one separately, so it shows each section as soon as it's loaded. So let me add it here. Again, I just have a generated landing loading, so we need to add that here as a boolean, just like we did in the previous one. So I can just take that loading from here and use the same concept. Okay, and then we need to have use callback here, so let me just add that as well in React. Okay, perfect. The next thing I need to do is actually start working on generating that HTML. So once that handle generate landing occurs, I need to be able to first set landing to empty. And landing is really my HTML. So I need to set my HTML to empty. So just so that it doesn't keep on adding. And if there is an error, like there is no generated sections, I need to create a landing error really. For now, I'm just going to return with a console.log. And once we're done with that, and then I'm going to set generate landing loading to true. Even though we're not using it right now, I think it's just best practice to usually have it ready. And I want to set the error to false if we had that handled, but we don't right now. The next thing I need to do is, again, call that response or to generate that components themselves or the HTML pages. So I'm going to have a new API here called generate components, or yeah, and I'm going to invoke that request here. So let's do that here. And for now, just again, to make it much easier for myself and for us, because we're not really focusing on OpenAI Stream or AI Stream right now, or OpenStream right now, what I'm going to do is I want to loop through my generated items. So I have these generated sections.map item. I'm going to use that same function here. And for each one of them, I want to call that generate component. So let me just rename it to generate component only. And then for each item, once I go to the map, I want to add that item or call fetch on that item. So let's just do the fetch. Again, we could do it all at once, or we can do it one by one. It's really up to us. Let me just make this as an async call. It is. So I can just make this as a for loop. Okay. And put it like that. And then for each generated section, so I'm going to generate stringify each section as a message and then send it over. And if response is okay, so let's make sure if the response itself is okay. If not okay, then throw an error. If it is okay, then I'll await the response.json to get that data, and then I need to handle that generate HTML. So you'll see here, handle generate HTML doesn't append to HTML, which adds it to the current HTML we have. So that should really be it. That's all I need to do here, except of course, create that function generate component that we have here. I'll just copy and paste this in here with my handle. Again, I'll take the message. If the message is not a prompt, then I'll start a response as well in completion. This time it's going to be a little bit different. So all that I'm changing between the last one and this is what the message is here. So let me just go to my message in generate HTML that I want, which should be to create the actual HTML itself. So I'm going to say here, given an input name and description, you will generate a sample HTML component for a campaign landing page on an intranet representing the description. Use HTML and Tailwind CSS. Answer should contain the HTML only, and use real image placeholders from Unsplash for that info, and then I'll pass in the message. So it's really very similar to what we have done in the past. It's just here I'm actually sending that message here, that description ultimately as a message. Okay, and then we'll start a JSON response and await it and return that response here as output text. So let's see what happens when I do that. Okay, so I paused for a few minutes just to do some fixes, like passing it as message, not messages, and passing the section and description. I've also created the generate landing page loader, but I don't really use it. And we'll see here as I go back into my site here that I'm now generating the actual sections. And then once that's created, we're going to actually create the HTML and see what happens. Now that the sections have been created, I'm going to click on generate page. what this will do is it will start generating the page for me. Again, it's not streaming, so it's going to take each section of these, like the hero banner, and then display it, introductory text, and then display it. And it does take quite a while to do that. So here you'll see it's starting to create the first piece of the HTML. Again, it's going to keep going through them one by one. One thing you'll note here that sometimes it does have things that are not HTML. I usually parse these with a regular expression just so that it shows something correct. Other than that, it's going to continue on to create the full page. There you have it. That's all you need to do to create or generate a landing page using GPT. What we're going to see next is how do we use OpenAI Stream or create a stream for this, specifically for the JSON first here, because one complexity is that JSON cannot really be streamed because it's no longer text where it's streaming one by one. So how do we, while it's being streamed, collect it and then package it into pieces so that we can display it once a piece is ready? That's what we're going to see next.